All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go over the Hardy-Weinberg practice worksheet with you. I'm sorry that I can't be in school to help you guys out, but hopefully this will answer any questions you have in preparation for the test, which is next class. So I'll go through each one, try to give you explanations as to what's going on, and hopefully this will help. All right, so the first problem here is population of rabbits may be brown, which is the dominant phenotype, or white, which is recessive. Brown rabbits have the phenotype capital B, or capital B, lowercase b. White rabbits have the genotype lowercase b. So right off the bat, it gives us the frequency of capital B. Okay, so there's two letters here, right? So that is homozygous dominant, right? Capital B, homozygous dominant. In Hardy-Weinberg, homozygous dominant is represented by p squared. So we now know that p squared, frequency of capital B, is 0.35. So we can do p squared equals 0.35. And as I kind of mentioned before, the trick to all of these problems is to figure out what P and Q are. So that's what I kind of do off to the side. Like, I don't even read any of the other questions. Let's figure out what P and Q are, and then, go from there. So what we have to do here is we have to take the square root of 0.35. And that is, hold on, just got to get my calculator going here. Let's see here. All right. So I got 0.59. Sorry, I had to get my calculator set up. So now that I know P, I can get Q. So Q is going to be equal to 0.41. Now that because remember that P plus Q equals 1, that'll always be the case. So there's our 2. Now what we can do is read the rest of our questions here. So what is the frequency of heterozygous rabbit? Heterozygous in Hardy-Weinberg is 2PQ. So that's going to be 2 times P, which is 0.59, times Q, which is 0.41. So if I do that, I got 0.48. And you can round everything to the hundredths place. That's going to be how we do that for the, for the test as well. And again, it's asking for the frequency here, so that's why I'm putting 0.48. When it asks for frequency, it's always the decimal. If it asks for percentage, then we change that to a percentage. What's the frequency of the B allele? Well, the B allele is P, so that's 0.59, because it's the capital B. What's the frequency of lowercase or lowercase b allele? That's going to be 0.41. That's Q. Okay, that's the first one. All right, next one. Population of birds contains 16 animals with red tail feathers and 34 animals with blue tail feathers. We've got 50 birds here. Blue tail feathers are dominant. Okay, so 34 of them have blue tail feathers, and we know that's dominant, which means the red tail feathers are recessive. So on this one, and this is kind of true for unless you're given. Like in the previous one, we were given the homozygous dominant. Another trick is that you always really want to focus on the recessive. And that's because blue tail feathers, if we're going to use T, let's say T for tail, right? If it's dominant, 34 of them could be capital T, or capital T, lowercase t. I can't tell which one's which. But the 16 animals that have red tail feathers, the only way to have red tail feathers would be lowercase t, homozygous recessive. So we know that 16 out of 50 birds are homozygous recessive. And that is in Hardy-Weinberg, Q squared. So let's change the fraction to a decimal. So we got 0.32 is equal to q squared. Take the square root of that. Let's see, 0.32. We got 0.57. So q equals 0.57. It was 0.5656, etc. So we're going to round that to the hundredths place. And then if we know q, then we also know p, and p would be 0.43. Now that I have p and q, now I can go ahead and answer the questions. So what's the frequency of the red allele? Okay, so again, allele means letter. It's just a single letter. Red is the recessive letter, so it's just asking for q. That's 0.57. What's the frequency of the blue allele? Blue is dominant, allele letter. That's going to be 0.43. What's the frequency of heterozygous bird? That's going to be 2pq. So it's going to be 2 times p, which is 0.43, times q, which is 0.57. So 2 times 0.43 times 0.57. I got 0.49. Okay. And then what percent of the birds would be homozygous for the blue allele? So homozygous for the blue allele. So that's going to be homozygous dominant. So that would be p squared. So that's going to be 0.43 squared. I got 0.18, but it asks for the percentage, so we just change that to a percent. 18% would be homozygous dominant. Okay. All right, moving on. Next one, if 98 out of 200 individuals in a population express the recessive phenotype, what percent of the population would you predict to be heterozygous? It doesn't say key off to the side, but hopefully at this point you kind of get the gist. We're gonna find P and Q first. So 98 out of 200 in a population express the recessive phenotype. Okay, phenotype means that's what we see on the outside. So kind of like up here, it would be like red tail feathers. It's whatever isn't very specific as to what we're talking about here, but the recessive phenotype is going to be homozygous recessive. Okay, so 98 out of 200 is equal to q squared. Okay, we're going to change the 98 out of 200, change that to a decimal, so that's 0.49 equals q squared. Take the square root of that, and q equals 0.70. That one was easy math. P would then be 0.30. Okay? All right, what's the frequency? I mean, I know it says this here, but notice that's down here. Okay? So what is the frequency of the recessive allele? That's going to be Q. It's 0.70. Now that we have Q, you can solve for P. What's the frequency of P? It's 0.30. So it says, what's the frequency of the heterozygous population? It's going to be 2 times 0.30 times 0.70. So 0.6 times 0.6 times 0.7 is going to be 0.42. All right. Now it says, how many individuals would you expect to be heterozygous? Well, we have 200 individuals, right? And we know that 42% of them are going to be heterozygous. So all we do is we multiply 0.42 times 200. So anytime you're trying to find the number of individuals, okay, if you have the frequency, you just take that frequency and multiply it by the total number of individuals. In this case, it's 84. So there are 84 of them. That would be heterozygous. Okay. All right, moving on to the next one. So next one says if 81% of the population is homozygous recessive for a given trait, okay, so 81% is homozygous recessive, so that's 0.81 is equal to Q squared, homozygous recessive. Figure out what Q is, we're going to take the square root of that. We got 0.90 equals Q. That means 0.10 equals P. Okay. All right, what's the predicted frequency of the homozygous dominant population? So that's going to be P squared. So that's going to be 0.10 squared, which is 0.01. What's the predicted frequency of the heterozygote? So it's going to be 2 times 0.1 times 0.9. Okay, so that's going to be 0.2 times 0.9, which is 0.18. And then what's the predicted frequency of the dominant and recessive alleles in the population? So dominant and recessive alleles is just letter. So kind of weird to ask that at the end, but it basically is just asking you for P and Q, which you kind of already had to know to be able to do the rest of it. So kind of weird order there, but P equals 0.10, Q equals 0.90. All right, next one says 51% of a wild feline population carries at least one copy of the recessive allele. Okay, so that's kind of a weird way to say something, right? One copy, at least one copy of the recessive allele. Well, again, we could just make up some letter. Okay, let's say it's F for fur color, right? So the possible genotypes here would be capital F, capital F, capital F, lowercase f, lowercase f, lowercase f. Well, which of those contain at least one copy of the recessive allele? That's lowercase f, right? So it's these two are 51%, which means that homozygous dominant, the frequency is 0.49. So what we need to do, so homozygous dominance P squared equals 0.49. Take the square root of that to get to P. P equals 0.70. Q equals 0.30. Got my P and Q. Sorry. And we'll go ahead and figure out the rest. What's the predicted frequency of individuals in the population that express the dominant phenotype? That's a little tricky. The dominant phenotype is going to be this or this. So we have to add them. Oh, sorry. I just did the same thing twice. This or that, lowercase f, right? That would be the dominant phenotype. So basically what it's asking is P squared plus 2PQ. Okay, we got to do both. So P squared, we already knew was 0.49. It told us that in the very beginning. Plus 2 times 0.7 times 0.3. So it's 0.49. This, remember, this was the exact same from before. It's 0.42. So 0.49 plus 0.42 is 0.91. And again, it's predicted frequency, so I don't have to change that to a percentage. What is the predicted frequency of individuals that express the recessive phenotype? Well, now that we know 0.91 is the dominant phenotype, the rest would be the recessive phenotype, 0.09. So on the test, I can tell you that it's going to be a pretty straightforward one. Like these last couple were pretty tricky. It's going to be pretty straightforward, you know, something like number 2. That's what you should expect. If you're able to kind of go through these, be able to figure out what P and Q are, and then work your way from there, you should be golden for the test. Sorry I can't be there to kind of answer your questions, but been running a fever for the last 3 days, so figure you probably want me staying at home so I don't give this to you. But regardless, study is your only homework for the weekend, as well as getting your cheat sheet in order. So front and back of an actual physical paper, or you could do digital. Just remember to print out the digital copy and bring it with you to class. And then also don't forget to do the GIM kit. Okay, the GIM kit is available for you to basically, if you hit the required amount, it'll be $1,000 worth of fish to sell. That will show on my end. You don't have to do anything. It shows up on my computer that you completed it, and that's another 5 extra credit points. So I would definitely do that, and then just study and do the best you can. Okay, so have a good weekend, and hopefully I'll see you next week.